play some great old-fashioned honky-tonk ragtime barrelhouse piano. How many times have you piano players heard that when you played either a Scott Joplin rag or a piece by James P. Johnson? What is honky-tonk piano? Okay, the piece that I played there, incidentally, was kind of a stride version of the first ragtime piece of any kind that I ever heard when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I had a 45 RPM record of Joe Finger's Car on Capitol Records playing his own Ivory Rag, and he played it something like this. Okay, it swings in its own way, but certainly not in a jazz way or in a stride way. Joe Finger's Car was actually Lou Bush, who was an accomplished and trained musician that did studio recordings for many years and arranged for big bands. He latched on to the early 1950s honky-tonk piano craze, like many other very accomplished musicians did, and actually made commercial success out of something that wasn't really their forte in the first place. Not only Joe Finger's Car, but Johnny Maddox, a wonderfully talented musician who is still playing today, had the Crazy Auto Rag, and that pretty much overshadowed a lot of the other things that he was and is capable of doing because it was such a big hit. Then you had Big Tiny Little on the Lawrence Welk Show in the 1950s. Big Tiny is a terrific mainstream jazz piano player, playing with a jazz trio, and he emulates people like Oscar Peterson and Phineas Newborn. And but you put a derby hat and arm garters on him, and he will play honky tonk for you on the old Lawrence Welk Show. And then when Tiny left, we got Joanne Castle on the Lawrence Welk Show. And Joanne started out as, again, a very accomplished accordionist and a pianist who you put her at this piano and put a big smile on her face, and she'll play honky tonk for 2.5 minutes right on the Lawrence Welk Show. The idea of honky tonk ragtime piano. A honky tonk traditionally was a bar or a roadhouse where the piano player played kind of down-home, gutsy, bluesy, ragtimey piano. And the term honky tonk came about in the 1950s when this particular sound became commercially popular and commercially acceptable, and people started putting tacks on the hammers of their piano and playing with paper on the strings of grand pianos just to get that out of tune honky tonk sound. Well, it didn't have much to do with stride. It was kind of in the same category as ragtime and stride because it featured a left hand with a repeated pattern of octave chord, and a right hand with a lot of filigree around the notes. You take something like Chinatown, My Chinatown, and you might hear a style like this instead of... hear a version like that where the main melody was embellished by certain figures that came primarily out of old player piano rolls, and it created this craze in the 1950s, which when I was a kid growing up, I was intrigued by it because it was a totally different type of music. Another amazing fact that you may not know is that one of the most respected pianists of the last 50 years, and somebody who I have a great amount of admiration for, Dick Hyman, who is a terrific player, a wonderful stride player as well as many other styles. when I was 7, 8 years old, I used to watch a program called Beat the Clock, where Dick played the organ. And Dick also recorded honky tonk piano under the name KnucklesO'Toole. And Dick, if I'm wrong about that, go on YouTube and correct me. So anyway, is honky tonk stride piano? Not really. Honky tonk is, to the uninitiated, a sound that reminds people of stride piano, or vice versa. It's not ragtime piano. It's certainly not. That would never sell 1 million records in 1955. But if you do this, one of my first jobs in a nightclub in the late 1960s was as a substitute for Fred Finn of the Mickey Finn Show. And Fred featured a honky tonk right hand style with a rhythm section playing, where he had a very flashy right hand, but all in that honky tonk style. And when I went in to replace him in his nightclub, when he'd take a night off or something, I was going to UCLA at the time. I don't think he wanted me to imitate him, so I never did, you know. But the honky tonk style is something that came and was a big, prominent part of the whole ragtime craze, even though it wasn't ragtime and it wasn't stride, but it was a very strong presence from the early 1950s until probably the Scott Joplin ragtime craze of the 1970s.